Welcome to the Plant Trainers Podcast, where we're helping people improve their quality of life through nutrition and fitness. And now, your hosts, nutrition and wellness coaches, international speakers, Adam and Shoshana Chaim.
Hey, I'm Adam Chaim.
And I'm Shoshana Chaim, and we are
Propelled by Plants. Today we bring to you episode 252, Dementia and the Alzheimer's Solution with Team Sherzai.
In this episode of the Plant Trainers Podcast, we talk to doctors Ayesha and Dean Sherzai, and they're also known as Team Sherzai. We talk about dementia and the Alzheimer's solution. We have them break down what dementia is to give us a better understanding of what brain diseases are out there plaguing us in North America right now. Unsurprisingly, we learned that these diseases are spreading throughout the world, just like diabetes and heart disease, as the fast food culture migrates there as well. We talk about the ideas around genes, preventing and reversing dementias, so that people can start to forget the myths that they've been repeating and start to really understand the facts. Of course, Team Sherzai explains the whole body NEURO plan. They use this to educate their patients and readers on lifestyle change so that Alzheimer's disease doesn't have to grab hold of its victims earlier and more forcibly than it actually does. As we know, this affects not just the individual, but the family members who care about them as well, and that's why it's so important. Listening to this episode and making even the smallest change can not only help you to postpone or inevitably stop brain diseases from invading your life, but it can also help so many other prevalent diseases as well. This protocol is really for ultimate health.
And it's pretty crazy because the statistics are out of control. By 2030, a staggering 75 million people on our planet will be suffering from dementia and some sort of dementia. And that number, it's estimated to double every 20 years, which is kind of crazy. It's a really important episode, a lot of amazing information. So please share it with anybody you know that you think may benefit from this message. Email it to them directly, post it on your social media. Just get it out there. It'll really help a lot of people. As co-directors of the Alzheimer's Prevention Program at Loma Linda University Medical Center, Dr. Dean and Dr. Ayesha Sherzai, through their research and their extensive collective medical backgrounds, work to demystify the steps to achieving long-term brain health and the prevention of devastating diseases such as Alzheimer's and dementia. They're also the authors of the much acclaimed book, The Alzheimer's Solution, a breakthrough program to prevent and reverse the symptoms of cognitive decline at every age. The cool thing about Instagram is that it really highlights the quote, "A picture is worth 1,000 words." We've been having a great time with Instagram and with Instagram stories, bringing plant-based living to life for all of you. There's so much we can cover on the Plant Trainers Podcast, but we also want to help inspire you and give you more tools for everyday living. Whether we're posting about our own meals, our workouts, general healthy lifestyle tips, food shops, blogs, time-saving tips, or the occasional goofy thing our plant-powered kids did, we put it up there for you. So be sure to follow Plant Trainers on Instagram and say hi, interact with us. We love getting to know you there. And now for a moment of gratitude.
Today, I'm grateful for my voice being a little bit scratchy. I'm going to have to nurse back some tea to make it better for the rest of the podcast. But basically, last night, I ran a program for a school on yoga and meditation, and there were over 90 people in the first session. So I needed to use my voice a lot more than I thought I would. But I'm just so grateful to have these opportunities to go into corporations, to go into schools, to talk to parents, talk to children, and spread the message that yoga, movement, taking care of your mind is really important, and giving them the tools to be able to use that.
And along those lines, I'm grateful for this morning. I was doing some meditation and our daughter came downstairs and asked if she could do it with me. So that was kind of cool. And that's what I'm grateful for today.
Doctors Dean and Ayesha Sherzai, thank you so much for being on the Plant Trainers Podcast today.
Thank you so much for having us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Good. We're really glad to talk with you today about brain health and all of these other subjects that are going to come up. As our listeners know, it's something that I love to talk about, I love to explore more about, and I love to teach about as well. But before we get into all of that, do you have a moment of gratitude, each of you, that you'd like to share with us and our listeners?
Yeah, I think we're grateful for the fact that we're at a time in history where we can make a difference. We can be part of the next phase of justice, the next phase of health, the next phase of making a difference for this planet, and getting beyond the divides that usually separate us, and understanding the beauty and the love within all of us sentient beings.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. I am grateful to have the opportunity to be among my loved ones and the tribe of chosen family and friends that we have acquired over the years, to be of service to this world and to ultimately reduce suffering.
It's beautiful to hear the two of you talk like that. It makes a really big connection already. Just you're opening up your hearts, you're opening up your words, and I think that Adam and I, but also the listeners, are already starting to get a sense about how caring you are and how much you really do want to make a change in the world. And Dean, I think it's interesting, or Dr. Sherzai, that way you don't know which one I'm talking about. I think it's so interesting how you said, being here in this moment in time, where I think about a lot of what's going to come up in this podcast and a lot of the new developments or old developments in brain health, but there was never the pathway to get it to the masses, to get it to the people. And if we would have had something like social media, 100 years ago, how would the world be different now? And how much more progression would we be making in this area if people would have been aware of some of the research back when?
Absolutely. There would be so much less suffering. There would be so much more progress, but that's okay. That's part of the journey. And with this progress, there's also a lot of noise. I mean, because whenever there's volume, there's noise, there's feedback, all these kind of things that creates a lot of misdirection. But that's okay. As long as there's volume, as long as there's ability to speak out, the truth will manifest itself. There's only so long that people can hold back the truth. I'm a big believer of MLK's statement, and I love it because it always orients me, centers me. The arc of history is long, but always bends towards justice, and I expand that to health, goodness for the planet, and everything. We just happen to be in that sliver, and sometimes it's difficult when you're in that sliver. When you feel the resistance, when you feel the chaos, when you feel the noise that actually obfuscates the truth. When it comes to health and other realms as well. But, in the bigger picture of time, you realize, it's okay. We're part of that tribe that's working for the greater truth, for the greater good.
I think that we're going to be talking about brain health, and it's really important that people understand what we're really talking about. I mean, millions and millions of people are affected by the health of their brain and Alzheimer's and dementia. And before we get into more detail about it, maybe you guys could differentiate a little bit, if there is a difference, between Alzheimer's and dementia so that we could be clear about it moving forward.
Sure. So dementia is the bigger category, the umbrella term, and it refers to a condition where people start having trouble with their cognitive function, whether it's memory, judgment, decision-making, problem-solving, language, and eventually problems with motor function. And Alzheimer's disease is the biggest category of dementia. About 65 to 70% of all dementias are Alzheimer's disease. Other types of dementias are vascular dementia, Lewy body dementia related to Parkinson's disease, and some other small esoteric kinds. Frontotemporal lobe dementia is also one type.
And then when we talk about brain health, are we talking about just these diseases, or is there more to it?
Well, so when we say brain health, we essentially point towards the cognitive capacity of each and every individual and how to attain it. We have, over the decades, have had the opportunity to understand the brain better with the tools that we have and with all the fabulous research that is going on. And we believe that, the disease or Alzheimer's disease is just a small part of the whole picture, and that we can do so much to attain the maximum capacity of this incredible organ.
Our book is called Alzheimer's Solution, but the initial title was Alzheimer's Solution, Avoiding Alzheimer's and Building a Better Brain. The idea is that it's not just about simply avoiding Alzheimer's, but what the things that you can do that are under your control can significantly affect your ability to maintain a vibrant cognitive capacity well into your 80s, 90s, and beyond. That's what we're hoping to, the conversation that we want to start, that kind of capacity is yours to have as you get older.
And that it's essentially a decision that we make on a regular basis to achieve it. The idea that our cognitive functions are set in stone during our childhood or up to a certain age is false. We have complete control over our brain, and we decide how we can expand it or inhibit its growth.
It's so interesting because a year ago we had my grandmother on the podcast who was 95 at the time. Now she's 96, and she's definitely got more than just her wits about her. And it's so devastating to see how I have other friends whose grandparents or even parents are at the stage where, they don't recognize people, they can't dress themselves, they can't brush their teeth. And I wonder how much, we'll get into it, but how much of this is reversible and how much of this is permanent? And is there a difference between some of these brain diseases that you were talking about in terms of them being permanent or reversible?
And how much of it is even preventable?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the idea that Alzheimer's, once somebody develops Alzheimer's, you can reverse it is false. Some people have written books and have made these claims, and they're playing with people's hopes. That's false. You can affect the curve, the progression of the disease once somebody has Alzheimer's through lifestyle. But if they have Alzheimer's, fulminant Alzheimer's, we're talking about one that's advanced, there's no evidence that you can reverse it at this point. But prior to Alzheimer's, even at the mild cognitive impairment stage, which is pre-Alzheimer's, we know from many, many studies that we've actually cited in our book and our own studies that you can significantly affect its progression. You can slow it down, you can stop it, and reverse it. And especially if you start earlier. In fact, just a paper came out last month, the very robust paper that showed a study that showed that in midlife, what you do in midlife profoundly affects your brain health progression thereafter, in your 40s, 50s, and 60s. So yes, you can stop progression of the process. You can reverse the progression and significantly affect the disease before it happens. Now, the key point here is Alzheimer's is not a point, meaning that all of a sudden you developed Alzheimer's or any of the dementias. It's a process that started 20 to 30 years earlier. And if you take it like that, then you understand that what you do 20, 30, 40 years earlier can profoundly affect if you even get the process going or even develop the disease. So that's the language change that we want to bring in, the paradigm shift.
What are some of those key factors that you can look for at, I guess you're talking about the age of 40, 50. What can we look for at those ages to see that we're on the wrong track?
If you want to look for them as far as blood tests and imaging and all that stuff, yeah, there are things that we talk about, 4 variables: inflammation, oxidation, glucose dysregulation, and lipid dysregulation. All this fight that, no, it's all about fat. No, it's all about sugar. No, it's both of those. I mean, there's a whole lot, hundreds of studies that show that when you have too much cholesterol, when you have too much saturated fats and hydrogenated fats, they create inflammation, they create damage that can then go into amyloid and destruction. And if you have glucose dysregulation, meaning not just diabetes, but even pre-diabetes, elevated levels of sugar. We just published a paper, a nationwide paper, Ayesha and I, that showed that regular elevated sugar levels affected cognition. Mm-hmm. So with that in mind, if you look early on, you see if there's inflammation, your glucose dysregulation is affected, you have blood pressure, you have cholesterol, this kind of stuff. Those are markers of brain disease. The brain is completely contiguous with the rest of the body. The same things that affected the rest of the body affects the brain exponentially more. This 3-pound organ, 2% of body's weight, consumes 25% of body's energy. When you thought that the heart was vascular, had lots of little arteries and veins, the brain has 1,000,000 times more. So it's the same system that works everywhere else, but at much greater pressure. So therefore, those factors that need to be affected, which is make sure that your glucose levels are normal, your blood pressure is normal, your cholesterol is normal, and a lot of other things that we've written in the book. If you take care of those early on and you see that they're going abnormal, you can definitely push the disease back 10, 20, 30 years or not get it at all during your lifetime.
So just to recap, what you're saying is heart patients, stroke victims, people with diabetes, those are the people who are at the highest risk of developing dementias later on in life.
Oh, absolutely. And there's direct evidence to that effect in large population studies when they see the relationship or the correlation between these diseases, whether it's vascular or inflammatory. All of these diseases actually significantly increase the chance for developing Alzheimer's disease.
When somebody has traumatic brain injury from football, let's say multiple injuries or other things, that's not a mechanism in itself. What that does is either cause inflammation or vascular damage and repetitive damages that lead to those kind of things. And subsequently, then the person gets a higher risk for dementia. Mm-hmm. So it's the same four mechanisms. They're not independent. They're kind of completely interconnected. We just wanted to kind of show that you can approach it from different directions. And fortuitously, the cure is also in that. Mm-hmm. If you eat a healthy, food that doesn't affect your glucose or actually tempers it and manages it, and you eat the kind of food that doesn't increase inflammation, and you don't eat the kind of food that increase oxidation, and same thing with lipids and fats, your chances go significantly lower with this kind of food. Same thing with exercise. And 5 variables that we've defined, and Ayesha will go into this, the 5 factors, lifestyle factors that dominate your risk profile. They affect these factors.
So before you get into those factors, those key things that people should be doing, I want to know, and I'm sure a lot of people do, want to know how genetics play a role here. Because you hear a lot of times, oh, my parents have Alzheimer's, I'm going to get it too. Or my husband had it and now I have it. It kind of runs in the family, even though that's not genetic. When it's husband and wife, I get that. But I've seen that in families.
There's a name for that when your partner gets the diseases that you have. I don't know.
They were kind of feeling bad for them and they took it over. I don't know. But how does...
Sympathetic, yes. Consanguineous relation. Yeah, the genetics, all diseases are genetic. I make a joke, I say even if you get in a car accident, there's a genetic factor there. But some diseases are heavily driven by genes, such as Huntington's. If the father has it, we can predict when and how, at what age and the son will get it because of the number of repeats of a part of the gene. Other diseases, sickle cell and many other diseases are heavily driven by genes. But many of the chronic diseases of aging are polygenetic, meaning it's not one gene, it's multiple genes, and those genes are not disease genes. They're your body's response to trauma throughout life. So far, 5 genes have of the population that develops Alzheimer's, 5% of them have the heavily genetically driven variety. They're presenilin 1, presenilin 2, and APP. Those people who have those genes will get the disease, and they'll get it early. And although lifestyle has some effect on it, but not much, they'll get it early. But the other 90 to 95% have multiple genes that are involved, as many as 30 that have been identified so far. Those genes have to do with your body's response to inflammation, your body's response to vascular trauma, your body's response to oxidation, your body's ability to get rid of waste. It's called lysosomal storage, getting rid of waste. So these are all your ability to withstand lifestyle challenges, right? So that gives you a range, anywhere between 10 to 40 to 50 years. What happens to you in life by luck, like car accident, head trauma, or how you've lived your life, and those are the 5 factors, determines if you're going to get it earlier or much later into your 90s or 100 or afterwards. That's how genes operate when it comes to Alzheimer's.
So diet is obviously one of the biggest players in there.
Yes.
Absolutely. Diet is the environment that you create for your brain. And we believe it's one of the most important factors. And how can it not be? It's essentially the building blocks and the fuel that you provide. And we've seen over and over again from decades of studies that a particular type of dietary pattern is associated with a better brain. And in our own research and from the research that we've seen, it over and over comes back that a plant-based diet, a whole food, unprocessed plant-based diet seems to be the best diet for the brain. And it provides the necessary micronutrients, the vitamins, the macronutrients, everything that one needs for the neurons to thrive, for the connections to be made, and for the inflammation and all the derogatory processes that cause Alzheimer's disease to be minimal. And it's incredible that people try to focus on a specific vitamin or a micronutrient. Reductionism is very common, but we don't eat a multivitamin or a micronutrient at a time. We eat a dietary pattern, and if one eats an unprocessed plant-based diet, that's the way to go. That's the best diet for the brain.
Is there research that supports whether or not the plant-based diet is actually preventative and actually help building strong neural connections and keeping these brain diseases away, or if it's actually more of these processed foods and animal products that is creating it and causing it within the body? We're taking a short break to let you know that this episode of the Plant Trainers podcast is sponsored by Legrand Power of Plants. They are a Quebec-based company that prepares fresh plants into ready-to-eat meals and condiments to promote and facilitate a healthy and balanced lifestyle. You know that the benefits of a plant-based diet can improve your blood pressure, decrease heart disease, lower cholesterol, and better control weight. But it can be hard preparing every meal from scratch. That's why we're so glad that Legrand products have made their way into Ontario and parts of the United States. They have products we trust at our own dinner table and offer high-quality ingredients and nutrients that even kids enjoy. Their pastas, sauces, pestos, soups, and chilies are some of the best out there and allow families to get back to the healthy dinner table again. Legrand's products are a bridge to a clean, real food eating way of life by harnessing the power of plants every day so you can experience your full vitality. Check out the link in the show notes or visit legrandpowerofplants.com to find out where these products are sold near you. You can also ask your local health food store about carrying their soups, chilies, sauces, and pestos. And now back to the show.
So it's both. The plant-based diet provides the necessary fuel for these connections to be made, and it also completely negates the harmful processes from destroying those connections. When I say connections, we're born with a set number of brain cells. Every individual has, on an average, between 87 to 100 billion neurons, and one can have as little as 2 or 3 connections between these cells, or as many as 30,000 connections. And the more connections, the faster the brain is, the healthier it is, the sharper the memory is.
More resilient.
And it's more resilient. And when you create a great environment for the brain with a whole food plant-based diet, those connections are continuously made. And the inflammatory processes and the oxidative processes that destroy these connections, they are not there anymore. The studies that have shown the benefit of a whole food plant-based diet were essentially started by looking at populations and comparing populations who ate a heavily processed diet or a meat-based diet versus a plant-based diet. We live in Loma Linda, which is one of the healthiest places in the U.S. It's actually a blue zone, the only blue zone in the United States. And a study that was conducted in 1993 was very, very clear that people who ate a meat-based diet had a 50% higher chance of developing Alzheimer's disease. So they actually had a twice as high chance of developing Alzheimer's disease compared to those who didn't eat meat. And then over and over again, you see in multiple studies, one of the research studies that we conducted last year, and it's about to get published, showed that when you adhere to a plant-based diet, you actually reduce your risk of cognitive impairment and stroke significantly. But the most wonderful thing about that study was that it's not an all or none phenomenon. We created an adherence score from 0 to 9. 9 meant you adhere to the diet very well, and 0 meant you didn't adhere at all. Every small step, every increase in that score towards 9 reduced the incidence and prevalence of stroke and brain diseases, which means small changes actually make a big difference. And I think that's a very empowering message for everyone.
So if the research is there and the evidence is there, why do you think it's taking people so long to make these changes? Do they not know about this research? Is that part of the problem?
Yes, it is, definitely. It took the data for cigarette smoking was out 30 years before public health started to even make the first step. And that's smoking. Now it's almost everybody accepts the fact that smoking is bad for you. It causes cancer. But it took 30 years. In fact, at the beginning, doctors would be on TV with commercials that cigarette smoking is good for you. So it takes time. And then now with the social media and everything, there's a lot of noise being introduced by people who want to do little quick sales of, carbohydrates are all evil, because it's a simple thing to eliminate, one thing. Or this superfood is great, or going paleo or eating meat all the time is there's a one paper that shows it's positive and everybody else has been hiding the truth. Well, that's a lot of noise to fight against, but this is the history of mankind. It takes time. We turn it around over time, and if it took cigarette smoking 30 years to get to the point where we are now,
actually 70 years,
to accept it, I think it's going to take a while for profound amount of data. It's not lacking. I mean, we're talking about from the Harvard studies to the Columbia studies to the Adventist Health study to the California teacher study. Every study shows that a whole food plant-based diet has been good for heart, for diabetes, for everything else, and now for the brain more and more. Yet all of a sudden you hear this one little paper that coconut oil is good for everything, and based on, suspect data at best. But it's going to take time. But like I said originally, truth will manifest itself.
And I think, like Dean said earlier, it's our desire for quick fixes, and that has been the pattern in health for many years. And now we're realizing that it's more complex than that. That it's lifestyle. That it has to be a very comprehensive approach towards health and wellness rather than a small pill or a small vitamin.
The superfood of the week, superfood of the day. Even now, we just put out a list of 20 of the healthiest foods for the brain. We felt so uncomfortable about that, but that's what people want to hear, But that's okay. 20 foods is better than one superfood.
We go through the same thing where if you want new people to listen, you have to catch them. You have to catch them with a headline. So, we will put out what are the best beans, and we will put out what are the best superfoods. And then when you read the main body or when you watch the Facebook Live, you find out that it's not just the one simple food. It's a combination thereof, and there's lots of learning in there. So you got to catch them with that title, right? Even though it does make us feel uncomfortable, because it's not just those individual foods. But what I wanted to also ask you, because you mentioned coconut oil, and I think people have this very big misconception of, if you took my diet and added coconut oil to my diet, I would be less healthy. But if you took somebody and took them off of lard and started putting coconut oil, that might improve their health. So we need to have that understanding of what the oil is doing. So how much weight, how much leverage does processed oils have on the brain health?
So we're so, one of my favorite things that we do is we always couch the conversation by saying, to the best of our knowledge today, which doesn't make us a very, very good in parties, because every sentence would end with best of our knowledge today. But that's actually the humility of science. Absolutism is killing us at so many levels that we're not going to get into that. But the humility of saying data so far, and what is data? Data that's been repeatable by independent parties, that has been shown in large populations, and then somebody else took it that was completely unrelated to the first group and repeated it and validated it. That's a good place to start. And even there, we don't say cause and effect. We say there's enough strong evidence to kind of now go to the next phase, right? That's how we do it. So that, to the best of our knowledge, is a good place to start. Not fun, but a good place to start. And we say, to the best of our knowledge, up to the point that we even wrote the book, we used to say polyunsaturated fats and monounsaturated fats are good for you, and saturated fats and hydrogenated fats are bad for you. Well, just now, multiple papers have come that even poly and monounsaturated fats are not as bad, but they're not like the medicine that we made them sound to be. Are they? It's not like as if you take a bottle of, actually one of my patients did this. He would drink 3 cups of olive oil a day. I mean, imagine that. That's just painful, as if it's a medicine. There's no evidence that the olive oils or virgin olive oils are medicinal. But if you're going to replace one thing with another as a bridge, we're all for that. We're not the binary. We don't follow the binary approach, all or none. Even when it comes to meat, I mean, we don't eat meat, but people who are heavy meat eaters, like I was at the beginning, when I was in Pittsburgh, I used to drive to Philly to eat Philly steak and cheese. Take the next step, reduce it and go to the next stage. So yeah, incremental change toward an optimal is the way to go.
Yeah, and we can talk about nutrition for hours and hours, and that was just the first of the factors that are important when we're talking about we really are talking about whole body health, which is the key to brain health, and that's what you guys talk about a lot. So what are the other factors that we need to look at when we're talking about lifestyle changes?
Sure. So in our book, we created an acronym, NEURO, like neurology. So N stands for nutrition, which we talked about. And the other factors are E for exercise, U, unwind or stress management, R for restorative sleep, not just the type of sleep where you're given, a sleeping pill and you're knocked out and you sleep for 7-8 hours and then wake up, but the type of sleep that allows you to go through each and every stage of sleep because they're so important. And then O stands for optimizing mental activity and social activity. And it has to be a very comprehensive way of including all of these elements for the best brain health.
We often hear people say, really, that's the case. My father was highly educated or grandfather and mentally active throughout his life, and said that was the case for me. My grandfather and Ayesha's highly educated people. So the optimizing mental activity they took care of, didn't they? Because it's what you do throughout life, how much you challenge your life. But then when it came to both of our grandfathers, when it came to food, it was absolutely horrendous. They both had diabetes. They both had high blood pressure, and then forget about exercise. It was a complete. My grandfather was one of those philosophers that never moved. Well, actually, that's a redundant. So they just didn't move at all. So no exercise, no horrible food. So it doesn't matter how much you think, you're going to cause so much damage. So it has to be comprehensive. It has to include all of those. And at the center of all of this is stress management, not stress elimination. There's good stress and bad stress. And that's the cornerstone of all of life, which is stress management.
So when you talk about good stress and bad stress, if there's lots of endurance runners who are listening or lots of endurance athletes who are listening. So how does the stress that they're putting on their body, even though they're enjoying that stress, how does that affect their future?
It's not always enjoyment, by the way.
Well, you're the one who chooses to do it.
Right.
So the physical stress that we're talking about for endurance trainer or people who exercise on a regular basis is phenomenal. We now know that when people engage in moderate to intense level of physical activity, they produce certain growth hormones that actually create those connections that we were talking about between the brain cells. They're called BDNF, or brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And matter of fact, they've done studies right after an intense session of, say, 20 minutes of exercise, and the levels of BDNF skyrockets in the body.
Yeah. And
these growth hormones are incredibly important for not just creating connections, but maintaining the resilience of the brain. And interestingly, one of the factors that have been shown to be extremely important is leg strength. People who have strong leg muscles actually have bigger brains. They did studies on twin sisters. And, they had the same genetic background, but the sister who had stronger legs or engaged in physical activity actually had a bigger brain, especially the areas of the brain that are responsible for memory encoding, for problem solving and decision making. And the other thing about exercise and putting good physical stress, is that people who move naturally on a regular basis, even if they don't exercise, they actually do much better than people who are sedentary. In certain studies, they found out that people who exercise, say, for 20 minutes, but then the rest of the day they're sitting behind their desk for 4 to 6 hours, that sedentary behavior completely negates the exercise that they had done earlier during that day.
The other thing about endurance runners is focus. If there was any way I would increase somebody's intellectual capacity, and there is, and that's from children to adults, it's around the concept of focus. There's a particular area of the brain, posterior cuneate, that's actually focused on focus, or that's the center of focus. There are a couple of other areas as well, but that area is affected very early on in dementia. That area is affected in many diseases early on. And that area can actually be strengthened, and that creates greater ability to focus, to think sharply, and develop cognitive capacity. Meditation does that. Meditation is not magical. It does just that if you do it right. In fact, sorry, I'm going to digress a little bit. What people perceived as a failure, which is the fact that I can't focus, so I don't want to meditate, that actually is the act of building the focus center. So every time you lose focus and come back, that actually builds the focus center. So that's not a bad thing. Don't worry about the failure. Now, exercise, especially endurance runners, are the ultimate focus developers. They get into this zone for hours, and that ability to get into that zone and not just silence little noises or little scratches, they're silencing pain. They're silencing the universe around them. That develops the focus centers. So in so many ways, exercise and endurance exercise builds the brain directly, indirectly, and through focus. So you're doing a good job.
Now, the people listening that are not the endurance athletes, they're thinking, oh, so now I have to become an endurance athlete to build focus. That's not what we're talking about, right?
No.
They could do other types of exercise or movement that's going to help them build their focus.
And other types of meditation as well.
Absolutely. There was a time when people looked down on meditation in the world of science. I mean, I trained at Columbia University, and Dean was at the National Institutes of Health. And, there was a time when you talk about meditation or tell someone that you're meditating, they would think you're a little weird. And it was considered very soft, but not anymore, thank goodness, because we have great tools that actually see the brain live when one meditates. And we've seen how those areas of focus actually strengthen and develop in people who continuously get in that zone where they completely, disconnect themselves, even if it's for moments. And that focus translates into each and every element of our life, whether it's the foods that we choose, whether it's the time we make for ourselves, for our family and loved ones, for our community, how we manage stress, how we cope with every other environmental factor that is around us. It's incredibly important for people to actually understand that. You don't have to necessarily be physically active to develop that focus. You can do it in your car with the door closed in the parking lot for 30 seconds if you want to.
As Ayesha does it.
That is my way of focusing, actually.
Yeah. Not at the red lights, because then you'll get honked from behind.
Oh, no, absolutely. In the hospital parking lot right before hitting the clinic in the morning.
So what I want to put forward is that everybody should know that it's never too late to start. So whether you're 20 years old, 40 years old, 80 years old, whether you're already seeing signs of onset of dementias, then it's never too late to start, whether it's with your diet or with your meditation or your exercise or surrounding yourselves with loved ones, because it can keep all of your genes from producing and creating this happening sooner. But also, if you are in those stages, it could slow down the onset of more development. Is that all right?
Absolutely. And more importantly, although we don't develop as many new neurons, there was a time we thought that we didn't develop any new neurons after a certain age. We now know that we do, but it's not that many. The number of neurons is not going to be the way out of this, but the connections are. each cell can continually make new connections throughout life, well into your 90s and beyond. And as Ayesha said, each cell can make a few connections. There are as many as 30,000. Imagine that every day by eating well, by exercising, by meditating, by sleeping well. We haven't even spoken about that factor, which is incredibly important. And more importantly, by keeping your mind challenged and active throughout life, you make 30,000 connections per neuron. That level of connectivity gives you such a bank account, such a reserve that can withstand any trauma, and more importantly, can give you sustained, vibrant brain activity well into your older age.
So why is this? Let's talk about the sleep then. Why is that so important? Because so many people, they neglect their sleep. They want to work more hours. They want to stay up late. They want to go party. They want to get up early.
They want to hustle. They want to make money.
Exactly. It's all about being productive, but they don't realize that without getting that proper, good quality sleep, they're losing out on that production capability.
Sleep is critical. And, we lived in Beverly Hills. We were the co-directors of the Brain Health and Alzheimer's Prevention Program at Cedars-Sinai Hospital. So we saw our share of the cleanse of the day or the detox of the day, from every pore that you can think of. But Dean and I always stood by our message. There is basically two different types of cleanse that the body needs on a regular basis. One is water.
Lots of water,
because you need it for all the chemical processes and getting rid of all the toxins. And the second is sleep. I mean, when we sleep, basically two things happen, two very important functions. Number one, it consolidates all the information that we gather in a day. It puts it in the right folders and the files and cabinets so that any individual can retrieve it easily the next day. The second one is getting rid of all the toxic byproducts. Remember, our brain is constantly working. This little organ consumes 25% of the body's energy at any given moment. So imagine the byproducts and the toxins that are produced during these chemical processes. There has to be a way to get rid of them. And that happens when we sleep. When people don't sleep, the level of toxic byproducts and this one particular protein that has been associated with Alzheimer's disease, it's called beta amyloid. It goes very, very high, and it actually has been associated. The lack of sleep has been associated with the development of Alzheimer's disease. It shrinks the brain. It causes inflammation and oxidation. And so the second question is always, well, what about sleeping pills? Sleeping pills, we're not against pills. If it's important for people to get into that habit of sleeping at the same time and waking up at the same time for a short period of time, it's okay to take sleeping pills. But long term, it has to be sleep hygiene. It has to be cognitive behavioral therapy or meditation or whatever works for individuals to have a biological clock, a very, very firm but biological clock. And we now know that each and every stage of sleep serves a very important purpose for memory consolidation and getting rid of those toxic byproducts.
So what message do you have for people who are waking up throughout the night? We hear about that a lot coming in.
Well, it depends why they're waking up. I mean, if they're waking up because, especially men, because they have to go to the bathroom because of prostate or something of that nature, well, that underlying problem has to be resolved. If they're waking up because of anxiety and they can't go back to sleep, there are techniques that can be used through sleep hygiene or neurocognitive therapy or other measures to resolve that issue. If they can't go to sleep because they just are too wired up, figuring out if it's the fact that they're eating food too late in the day, because as we get older, our digestion gets slower. You might not feel it. You're not going to hear that sound, but the stomach is working, and that keeps you hyper. Or you've had too much caffeine, or you had too much light, blue light, especially later in the day, like from the computers and other things, or you're exercising too late. So there are so many things to figure out. It's individualized. You have to go to a sleep doctor or a neurologist that's specialized in this, and you can figure it out and slowly eliminate the thing that affects your sleep. And one of the first things to do, here's a little advice: go to bed the same time, wake up 8 hours to 8.5 hours later every day the same morning. Now, those two, once you do that, even if you haven't slept at night, the next day don't take a nap. after a while you fall back into cycle. That might help a little bit, if not all, but a little bit. The other thing is, one very important factor, a brisk walk in daylight, especially natural light, has an amazing ability to reset your circadian clock, especially early in the day. And that can help as well. And there's many other advice that we can give them, and they can go to our website and get some information from there as well.
So that's great advice. There's tons of that. That's awesome. And of those 5 factors, your nutrition, exercise, unwind, restore, optimize, if somebody wanted to pick one thing today to get started on, what would be that one thing that you would recommend they go for?
I'll give them 2 answers quickly. One is it's individual. You really have, we're more than anything else, we're behavioral neurologists. You really have to build around your own strengths and around your own opportunities where you think you can succeed. But if I had to say to anybody, because one thing that will give people the quickest response is either eliminating or significantly reducing sugar, or if they haven't exercised at all, start a brisk walk regimen. Something that is well circumscribed, time bound, that you can see the effect in 6 weeks. Usually it takes that long for you to get the habit going and for you to see an effect.
That's great. And my last question right now for you is, at what point are we holding old age homes accountable to really taking a look at the research and understanding what the proper diet is for everybody, especially because they have a higher prevalence of patients or clients who are experiencing brain health issues or dementias? At what point are they accountable to provide plant-based diets and stop with all the fish and lean meats and dairy products for calcium and all of those other fads that are happening right now?
Oh my goodness. Right now, yesterday, they're way behind on all the research and the data that's out there. And Dean and I have made a lot of effort to make ourselves available and to disperse information in those communities because it's so important. And to that end, we actually created an organization called the Healthy Minds Initiative. All the profits of the book actually go towards the Healthy Minds Initiative, and we create brain health workshops and talks in the community. And you can learn more about it on healthymindsinitiative.org. It's an incredible opportunity for us to be connected with different communities. We've started a couple of projects in Sedona and Anchorage,
Beach
Alaska,
cities.
in beach cities in California. And it's growing. We love the fact that people are interested, they're open to conversation, and they're inviting us to start those groups in those cities.
Including nursing homes.
Yeah, I think that's really important, and we're going to link to that in the show notes.
You guys are doing really incredible work and such important work, and we're going to link to what you just said. If anybody wants to reach out to you, where else can they find you online?
They can go to our website, teamsherzai.com. And they can contact us there. Dean and I check our mail every day, and we'd be more than happy to connect with them and find out how we can help them.
If they want to invite us to their community, we actually subsidize whatever funds they raise for their community. 100% of it goes back to their community, and we subsidize from our funds as well. Another thing, if they go to teamsherzai.com, there's a brain health assessment tool there where they can get a score as far as where their brain health is and how they're doing with regards to nutrition, exercise, stress management, and all these variables.
That's great. We're going to link to all of those in the show notes at planttrainers.com.
And we'll also link to your book that we mentioned a couple times, which is The Alzheimer's Solution, a breakthrough program to prevent and reverse the symptoms of cognitive decline at every age.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today in your busy schedules, your busy lives, and of course, everything that you're doing to get the message out to the masses, help to prevent all of these diseases from taking place, which in hand is helping people in terms of their own overall health, right? Diabetes and being overweight and heart health. It's the answer to so many questions out there. It goes hand in hand. So it's not just a better brain, it's a better body. And you've made a very nice, beautiful outline on how to take care of your whole self. And we really do appreciate what you're doing for everyone.
It's a pleasure to be connected with you guys. We're of the same tribe, and thank you for spreading the message and dispersing the correct information to everybody. You guys are doing such an amazing job, and we're grateful.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this edition of the Plant Trainers Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or any other podcast listening platforms. We appreciate the feedback we receive from you. Every time we get a 5-star rating or review on iTunes from one of our fans, it ensures other people will find us too. Thanks to our patrons. To become a patron, visit www.patreon.com/planttrainers. Even supporting us with $1 really makes a difference. Connect and follow us on Instagram and Twitter @PlantTrainers. Like Plant Trainers on Facebook, join our newsletter, and check out our website at www.planttrainers.com for awesome plant-based recipes and a list of our services. Email your questions to info@planttrainers.com so we can answer them on our upcoming Facebook Lives. We hope we've inspired you today. Join us again next time, and have a healthy day.